So what we've seen from side opposition today in their first speech is an attempt to break this debate down into a clash between the public and the private spheres. But we on side proposition believe that really this isn't fundamentally about choosing one at the total exclusion of the other. We simply believe that in order to promote the discourse of the entire nation, we should prefer one over the other by and large. And that's what we are standing by today. So for my third point, I'm going to be talking to you about how we have one nation and we need one equal playing field. But before I get into this, I would like to clash briefly with what side opposition has brought forward today. So first of all, they have this idea of diversity of opinions. That if we give people lots of choice, they will tend to choose everything in order to create a holistic view. But what we believe on side proposition is people have neither the time nor the desire to do such a thing. That most people, when they go get the news, they're checking their phone and they're just going to the one agency that they know they can trust to present the views that they believe and know to be true. No, thank you. Because what we think on side proposition is that people fundamentally want to isolate themselves within their own cubes of ideology. That people don't want to reach out beyond their comfort zones. No, thank you. And that we need an agency that is there in order to ensure that people can get both quick access to news and news that is well-rounded. And we believe that it is only by forcing people to see other views that they will then expose themselves to these views. So we believe that on the point of diversity of opinions, we can actually have more holistic views of topics with a publicly funded news agency that is required to represent everyone and everything. Secondly, we have this idea they brought up of the issue of quality and competition. But what we see is that they have misrepresented the model of news agency success. They say that in order for every news agency to compete, they're all competing for the same generalized demographic. But they are not. Because news agencies, because of the willingness and the desire of people to isolate themselves, the news agencies will tend to reach out to these people based on how they have isolated themselves. And so what does this do? It means that we essentially have competition for a monopoly. We essentially have a competition for one agency that is going to push the ideology of the niche better than another agency. And how do they push this ideology? Through sensationalism, through bias, through their own agendas rather than in the interest of the people. And so we see things like Sun News, which rose out of the fact that there really was no conservative media in Canada. And they rose up, and in order to drown out any other real competition, they have to become even more conservative in order to hold on to their niche. So we believe that the competition model they presented is good for general business, but that this is not about general business. This is about the economics of news agencies, and that is fundamentally distinct, something side opposition has missed. So thirdly, I'd like to go into this idea of how we have one nation, and we need one equal playing field. And the thesis for this is that the government should always try to level the playing field with regard to access to the system. Because we believe on side proposition that we have this myth in this country of a bicameralist system. That we have the House and the Senate, and those are the people that represent us. Well, we don't. We also really have a tricameralist system where we have the House of Commons, the Senate, and the news media, which also has an impact. But in order to ensure that this news agency is provides just as much opportunity for minorities to gain access to it as the House and the Senate do, we must ensure that the government is actively striving to level the playing field in every way. A government that is actively striving to ensure that they incorporate other views. And we believe that the private system will never do this. The private system will never look beyond its own boundaries because of the economics of the system that I've already elaborated on. But we believe that the publicly funded news agencies, by representing all aspects of the discussion and all sides, will encourage people who maybe take the side that is not of big business, which is funding the private sphere, that they will encourage them to get involved in the political system. So what are some examples of this? Well, we have the example of the tar sands debate in the country of Canada, where we see the conservative Sun media saying that the tar sands are our saviors sent from the heavens to redeem us. And then we have the liberal media, which is saying that Albertans are evil. And we have this clash. But what does the CBC do? Well, they report both sides. They report both what Sun News Media is saying, what the people of Fort McMurray who are employed by this are saying, but they also report, yes, one moment, sir, they also report what is being said on the liberal environmentalist side, so we have an encouragement of all actors to get involved in this discussion. Yes, sir?
Should we encourage people to formulate their own interpretations of news?
Yes.
And have the government do it?
We are encouraging people to formulate their own opinions by giving them a holistic view of the world. We believe that when we expose people to all views, they'll be more likely to pick and choose than if we allow people and encourage people to isolate themselves ideologically and never to reach out. Thank you for agreeing with our case. So now we'd like to go into another example, which is the idea of Thatcherism in the United Kingdom. Because there was a very strange thing. You had the Thatcherism debate where The Economist magazine said, we love Thatcherism, and suddenly conservative arguments sounded a whole lot like The Economist arguments. And then you had magazines like The Independent or The Telegraph, which are neither independent nor really use a telegraph. And these agencies say, well, we oppose Thatcherism, we are liberals at this time. And suddenly the liberal arguments start to sound a lot like The Independent and The Telegraph arguments. So what does this do? Well, at the time, who was the only news agency that was providing proper discussion of both sides? It was the BBC. It was the publicly funded British Broadcasting Corporation. And what did this do? It ensured that people were able to formulate their own views of what the Tories were doing at the time. It ensured that people were not, except for MPs, were not being drawn into their own ideologies, because people were going to the BBC for reasons of ease of access and because they appreciated this holistic view. In other words, when we give the option of people to formulate their own opinions, and we in fact prefer it, we encourage it, people will often choose that. But when we don't, when we prefer privately funded news agencies, when we reject the public sphere, people will tend to do that too, and they will isolate themselves. So, as this government, we must encourage a holistic view. We must encourage people to get involved. But we believe that the best way to get people to be involved in our society is by ensuring that their voices will be heard in this society and that they will not be drowned out in the partisan bickering of the sensationalist private news agencies. And in so doing, we firmly believe that we must have one nation and that we must have a level playing field for all ideas through the publicly funded news agencies, which will be required and which indeed do in the present time report on all sides of issues. So what have we told you today on side proposition? Well, my partner talked to you about the quality of news, but more importantly, she talked about the political impact. And so it is for the reasons she presented, the reasons I presented, that we firmly stand behind our case line that the publicly funded news media contributes more to public discourse than the private news media. And we are proud to stand by this resolution today. Thank you.